Okay, so I've got the knife out of heat treat now. I tempered it to about 60 or 59 HRC, and so it's going to be plenty hard and hopefully enough with enough spring so that it's not going to snap during some use. It's super thin right now. I'm going to thin it down a little bit more on the grinder. I'm going to take it to a 120 grit belt and then to a 400 grit belt before I do a hand polish on there. And I'm not sure how high I'm going to go on there. Maybe up to, I might put a mirror finish on it, but maybe not, so we'll see what happens. And I also have to clean up the ricasso here and the shoulders where the tang goes into the rest of it. I want to get that nice and square because I'm putting a small guard on here. So I'm going to clean that up. But first I'm going to start on the grinder with the 120 grit belt. Okay, so I have the knife at an even 400 grit finish. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring it to the Scotch-Brite wheel, and I'm going to just polish it up a bit more. The Scotch-Brite wheel is, I think it's around 600, might be 800 grit, and I'm going to use that to polish it up. You can see I started here a little bit, and it polishes it up quite a bit. Once I get it nicely finely polished on there, then I'm going to go to sandpaper, and I'm going to do the polish this way. But after I do this, then I'm going to clean up these lines here and make sure that everything there is even for the guard fit up. I'm ready for hand sanding. I'm going to take my little diamond files and I'm just going to clean up this area here so that I can get it nice and squared off for when I put a guard on. So I'm using a square diamond file, 60 grit I believe, and I'm just going to take my time and make sure that I have it nice and square. Okay, so I got the knife polished up to a mirror finish. I just covered it up with masking tape so that I don't scratch the blade while I'm doing the rest. And it actually polished up pretty easily. It's a small blade, I guess, so that didn't take too much. I brought it up to 2000 grit sandpaper by sanding by hand, and then went to a buff. I went through 2 different buffing compounds. I forget what they're called, but brought it up to a nice mirror finish. It's my first mirror finish, so I was pretty happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the handle. So I've got my handle design figured out, and I just glued it onto this wood with spray glue. So I'm going to cut it out, and once I get it cut out on the bandsaw, then I'm going to drill down, get it so that the tang fits in there, and then I'm going to be putting a brass guard up right here and a brass end cap at the end, and then do a brass pin. So the wood I'm using is bloodwood. It's orangish red. I think it'll turn more red with when you put oil on it, but I like that color. It looks pretty cool, and I think it'll look good with the brass, and it'll make a nice cool handle. So I'm going to cut it out in the bandsaw. I've heard it's pretty hard wood. I haven't cut it before, but I don't doubt it. It feels pretty hard, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, that actually wasn't that hard. So now I have it cut. I'm gonna I'll leave it pretty rough for now, and then I'll clean it up later once it's glued on, but it's a good start so far. Okay, so I've got it glued up, I got it cut out, now I've got it set up in my drill press. I've got the drill bit lined up so it'll go straight down the tang there, and I'm just going to slowly bring it down in there and drill out the tang. Uh-oh. So yeah, I've got that first hole drilled. I'm going to do another one just off to the side, and so that I'll have enough room to get the tang in there. Okay, so I've got the 3 holes drilled. Now I'm going to take my little needle file, and it's a diamond needle file, and it's 60 grit, so it's pretty coarse. So I'm just going to work on filing it out until I get all of the gaps gone and the tang fits in here. Okay, so now I have the tang in here. You can see there's a bit of a gap right here, but that's alright because I'm going to be putting the brass bolster there and on the end. So right now I'm going to take it to my grinder. I'm going to clean up the perimeter, get it a little bit cleaned up there, and then I'll start working on the brass. Okay, so here's the piece of brass I'll be using. It's pretty corroded, but that's alright. I'll be able to clean it up pretty quickly. It's nice and soft, so that won't be hard. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try find the middle of it. I'm going to line it up so that the tang will go right there, and I'm going to file it, make sure that I get it so it can get fitted up on here nicely. So I'm going to take my... Okay, so I got the guard marked where I want it to be, and now I'm going to try something a bit different for cutting a guard. Normally I would drill a hole and then file it and everything, but I'm going to see if it goes a little quicker. I'm going to be using some Dremel tools, so what I already started with this one. So I took a large 1/8 inch Dremel, and I cut the middle here. And then I'm going to take a small pinhole Dremel, and I'm going to go all the way through and see if that works for a tiny guard. Okay, so you can see that I've got the hole milled out in here. I use these little Dremel tools. They're super tiny, but so that way I wasn't going to go over the thickness of the tang, because the tang is super thin. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking a tiny diamond file, and I'm just filing out the inside to make it fit, so that I can bring it all the way down. I left it a bit undersized with the Dremel, that way I can get a nice snug fit with the tang by filing. So I just have to file it a little bit more, and then it'll fit all the way up till here, and I'll be ready to attach it to the handle. Okay, so now I've got the guard fitted, so you can see that, once I have it fitted up, there's no gap here. It's hard to tell from the camera angle, but often you'll have a gap kind of like that. And then you have to be, it doesn't look good in the end, but you have to be careful that you get it completely filed. It just takes time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to polish up the front here, and then I will glue everything together. I've got the handle here. I'm going to glue it before I pin it, because I want to make sure that I have the pinhole exactly where I want it. And with the tang being drawn in here already, I know exactly where I'll need to drill the hole anyway. So yeah, I'll just polish it up. I have my surface, my homemade surface, or flat surface. I guess it's 3/8 inch glass with just glued onto some 2x4s, and it's completely flat. So I'm going to take some sandpaper and just polish up the faces of it so that it's nice and polished. Okay, so I'm at the last grit. This is 2000 grit, and I'm spraying it down with WD-40 just as a lubricant. Yeah, so I'm gonna bring it to 2000, then I'm gonna buff it so that I have a nice finish. And when I was doing this, I was alternating which sides I was going in, stroking as I went up the grits. So for one grit I would go this way, the next grit I would sand this way. That way I was getting all of the grit scratches from the previous grits out of the steel, the metal. That way you'll get a much finer finish in the end. Okay, so I have everything polished up, and it's just ready for putting it all together. So I've got the epoxy mixed over here, and I'm gonna just pour it into the tang here, or sorry, into the handle. I want to make sure I get it all the way in there, so that I have a good fit, that there's enough in there to keep it in there. So let that sink down a little bit, and then I'll put the tang in there. You gotta be careful not to get epoxy on any of the parts that I polished up, like the guard or the tang. If I get epoxy in there after it's glued up, it's gonna be really hard to clean up. So I have this part here, and just gonna put it in there. Alright, and we'll get a little bit more in there. Okay, so now I've got set in there. I got to make sure that I clean up any of the spill out right at the tang where the blade meets the ricasso here, because otherwise you're gonna have epoxy on there and it's gonna look bad. So I will take some acetone and use a knife to clean it out. Find it. Okay, so I've got everything glued up now, and I pinned the handle too. You can see where I put the pin through the tang there, and now all I have to do is grind the handle, and then I'm going to put on the end cap. The end cap's also going to be brass. You can see that I left this round, so I'm going to have to round off this. I'll make a little indent in a 2x4, and I'll probably just pound it in so that I can hammer that in. Then I'll glue that on, and then polish that up once it's glued on. That'll be the easiest, I think. And yeah, right now I'm gonna get the rest of the handle shaped. So yep. Okay, so I've got the handle rough shaped. It's ready for hand sanding, except I want to put the end cap on first. So I've got that piece of brass. I'm going to take it. I'm going to polish it up. But first I'm going to curve it. So what I have to do is I'm going to take it, make a little block, and then hammer it into it with I'll show how I do that. It's kind of hard to explain. Okay, so what I did is I went to my grinder and I carved out a little hollow. And I'm going to be pounding this in here just a little bit to get the right curvature. So I'm going to set it up right there. And this is a fullering tool, and it's going to take a little bit because the brass is pretty thick. So I'm just going to go at it and curve it. So yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit of a curve, and I'm just going to make sure I'm going to take it gently until I match this curve exactly. Okay, so I've got it now. There's no gaps, and what I'm gonna do now just to make sure that it sticks is I'm gonna hollow out this part so I can fit more epoxy in there. I'll polish up this side a little bit so that the epoxy sticks, and I'll just epoxy it on there. And then I'll be able to trim it after to the exact shape, and then polish it up with the rest of the handle. Alright, so I've got the back of it drilled out a little bit, and I have this piece, it's got the right curve. So I mixed up some epoxy, just gonna lather it in there, fill up those voids. Want to make sure we have all of as much epoxy as we can in there and everything's covered. It's alright if it spills over onto the rest of the handle because we're gonna be still grinding that later once the epoxy dries. So I've got that there, and I have to remember which way it fits, and I remember that it fits this way, so put it like that. And I'm going to be clamping this too, because it's going to be wanting to... Okay, so I've got the end cap on there. I'm going to grind it to shape now. You got to be really careful when you're grinding it to make sure that you don't overheat it, because you can burn out the epoxy. So I'm going to just take it slow and constantly be checking, making sure it's not too warm. And then I'll go and polish up the rest of the handle. I'm going to do some on the grinder and then some by hand. And then I'll oil it up and sharpen it. Okay, so I've got the handle all polished up and finished. The blade is polished up, it just needs to be sharpened, and the handle just needs to have some oil. So I'm going to get that ready. I'm using tung oil, I believe. Yeah, tung oil, and I'm not exactly sure how well it will look on this wood. I did some testing and it seemed to be alright. It didn't make it too much darker, but brought out the grain a little bit more. So yeah, it looks pretty cool. I polished it up to 2000 grit. I didn't buff it though. My buffer is a bit dirty and it didn't want to take too long to buff it up. So, but it looks like that 2000 grit was enough. Yeah, I really like that look. So yeah, I'm going to do a couple more cycles of this. I want to make sure that it's really sealed because it's going to be used for for food. So I'm going to make sure that there's no way that wood moisture can get in here. And then I'll go sharpen it. So well, I'll sharpen it first, and then I'll do over the next couple days, I'll do a couple more coats of oil to let it penetrate in there. But yeah, I like that. Cool. Alright, there we have it. Finished kitchen knife. I really like it. It's small, it's super light, really thin, it's super razor sharp. I put a mirror finish on it. It was my first time doing a mirror finish, so it's a bit of a dirty mirror finish, but I like it. It's pretty good for my first try. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with this for first go. I think I'll be doing some more like this and more kitchen knives in the future. They're pretty fun to do. And a hidden tang, that was pretty fun. I had to work on getting that guard perfectly aligned there, but I think everything went pretty good. So yeah, this one is not for sale. This is just a practice version. But if you do want something similar to this, or even something totally different, you can contact me through my website or my email, which will be in the link in the description. And I do custom orders as well as production knives, so you can look at some of my production knives, or place a custom order for something similar to this or something totally different. I specialize in hunting knives, so if you're looking for a hunting knife or something like that, then definitely check me out then. Thanks!